Hello, and welcome back to this month's episode of Miss Dr. Kenya. I am looking forward to the conversation ahead. Today, we have our first student member of the Student Council joining us for a conversation today, and she's an expert. In our conversation last month, in the month of February, I talked about all of the executive orders and the executive memorandums that have been signed to date that impacted children and youth in schools. At the end of that conversation, I encouraged you to advocate at the state level, at the local level, and at the school level if you wanted to make sure that your student was in a safe and supportive environment. And so I have invited a student expert to talk about what advocacy looks like. Without any further ado, I want to introduce you to Miss Kate Riddle. Kate, welcome to Miss Dr. Kenya. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for the invite. I'm really looking forward to what we're going to talk about today.
No, I am absolutely honored that you said yes because I am excited to hear from you. But before I go any further, can you introduce the Miss Dr. Kenya audience to you?
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Kate Riddle. I'm a senior at Lafayette County High School in Oxford, Mississippi, home of the Ole Miss Rebels. I also serve on the Mississippi Board of Education as the senior student representative. I was also the junior student representative last year. I also serve on the National Student Board Member Executive Council, where I am the Southeast Regional Vice President. I'm also fairly active in my high school, serving as my NHS chapter's president, while also serving in the student council, beta club. I was chosen as my high school's female scholar athlete, being a dancer, so I was pretty proud of that as well. But one of my biggest joys in life is definitely advocacy, and that's been with me throughout my middle and high school career. So I'm so excited to talk about that today.
What an impressive resume, Kate. Have you always been? I heard you say that advocacy is one of your favorite things to do. And as you list off all of your wonderful accomplishments, I'm just curious, have you always been an advocate?
I'm fairly so. I One of my first memories in student voice was in middle school. I had a teacher named Miss Allen who was our student council leader for the middle school student council. And she was always so encouraging and supportive, and no matter what adventure we wanted to take on as middle schoolers. So I really took that to heart. And throughout my high school career, I really always thought of her and done what I needed to do in order to take as my role as a student voice.
Well, kudos to Miss Allen. Now, I am curious, you mentioned that you are a member of the National School Board Member Association. Can you tell us like what that is and how does one become a school board member, a student school board member?
Yes. So the National Student Board Member Association, also called NSBMA, is a network for student board members looking to connect or create a position at the local level at their school or district or state. So I serve as the Southeast Regional Vice President. So anybody in the Southeast, feel free to contact me. But basically, anyone who is looking to create a position at their school level should get in contact with NSBMA to help support them on that journey. We have a lot of pieces of policy that they can help you create. And we also have training opportunities available for student board members already pre existing. It's a great opportunity. And I believe that if you are interested in the executive council as a student, applications will probably open around August of the following school year. So if you're interested in that, I'd also be happy to help.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I just want to provide context for the Miss Dr. Kenya audience.
Mhm.
If you remember, we were talking about there are several different layers as it relates to what students experience on a day-to-day basis in the school building. And I talked about how we erroneously sometimes kind of give all of that responsibility to the principal or the school administrator. And absolutely, the school administrator does have some impact, but that school administrator does not work alone. That school administrator is working, number one, with central office. That is the overseeing body for all schools. And that central office is working in tandem with the school board. And so Kate is a member of her local school board. And so for Kate, we did do an entire Miss Dr. Kenya episode dedicated to the role of the school board. But can you just give us a general overview? What is the role of the school board?
Yes. So I serve on the Mississippi State School Board, the Mississippi School Board for the entire state of Mississippi. So my role looks a little different than it would for a local student board member. Mainly, my role is to provide a monthly report on a topic that I see fit, whether it be chronic absenteeism in schools or career and technical education, just anything that I recognize, especially living in a rural community. But at a local level, you might be more involved in decision making based on what your school lunch might be or different things that kind of boil down to the local level. But another thing I wanted to point out with you talking about the principals being mostly in charge or having a lot of the pressures directed towards them, I am seeing a lot of schools doing is creating either superintendent or principal advisory committees with students of the student body who are interested in kind of providing context to their principal or administrators on what they're seeing. This is also kind of a level of being a student board member, but it's usually a first step for a school district looking to eventually create that student board member position.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that. And so let's go back to what you said, right? You said that you have always been an advocate. And so my first question to you, Kate, is why is student self-advocacy so essential, especially in today's changing educational landscape?
One quote that I always talk about with my fellow members of NSBMA is that everybody loves student voice until they don't. So we hear a lot of talk about student voice and how important it is, and we kind of slap that label on things when really we're not actually advocating for student voice. So having that student board position is important to provide context on what is actually happening in the classrooms. Typically, local school board members aren't teachers and administrators and principals. They aren't the ones in the classrooms every day. Students are the ones in classrooms every day, and usually they're in more than one classroom every day. So, being able to provide that context to the board who doesn't sit in a desk every day is really important.
I love that. What I heard you say is that oftentimes you are absolutely correct. We say that we want student voice, but then when we hear the student voice, we feel like the ideas may be too radical, may not fit within, what we can do within the constraints of the budget. However, because you guys are the one you guys are the clients, for lack of better words. Like everything we do is in service to you. And so ultimately, if we want to make sure that we're doing a good job, we have to come back to you and be open to the feedback, even if it's something that we don't want to hear. I received that, Kate. I
Yes,
received. Thank you for
I agree with you.
that. So, how have students historically influenced change in schools and policies?
Usually, a student's role is kind of to watch from afar. We see a lot of student body presidents getting involved in like prom planning or homecoming planning, or student councils being in charge of X fundraiser for X fun activity. We don't see a lot of students getting involved in the nitty gritty things that are actually important about school. So, curriculum or lunch or different things that actually affect your education. Historically, students are really involved in mainly the fun aspect of school, which as a dance team member, I appreciate and I love the fun stuff about school. But it's important to also note that you're going to school for an education. So to be involved in that education making process is vital to your role as a student as well.
So, if I am a student at my local high school and I have some recommendations on how the curriculum could be more inviting, right? More engaging, more exciting. If I have some suggestions on things that I want to learn about that we aren't quite talking about right now in school, what do I do? Who do I go to?
So I had a similar experience actually. So I go to the county high school in my town, Oxford, and we experience, I wouldn't say a lack of, but there are substantially less opportunities for AP advanced placement classes at my high school versus the city school across the highway. Not to mention that the students at my high school pay nearly $100 for each class, whereas the city school does not pay out of pocket for those classes, or the students don't pay out of pocket. The city school pays for them. I went to an administrator in the central office and I talked to him about what I saw on a student level and also what I was seeing from a state level as a student board member. There were so many schools across the state that were providing all these opportunities to students, and there weren't that many opportunities at our high school. And I didn't see why there wouldn't be, considering what would be the difference between me going to this high school versus this high school. I think every student should have an equal opportunity to the education that they want. So if a student has an issue and they're seeking it out, I would try to talk to an administrator or your principal. And if that's not the right person, usually they will be able to direct you to who you need to talk to.
Okay, thank you. First, that was the first very practical strategy that you gave us, right? So if you are a student and you have some concerns, the first thing you can do is go to whoever is in your central office that is over that particular thing. So in central office, there's normally a person over school-based mental health. There is a person over special education. There is a person over elementary school, so on and so forth, right? So find the person within central office, send them an email, um, and or you can give them a call if you have access to their telephone number, schedule an appointment and sit down and talk with them. So that's the first very practical strategy. Thank you for that, Kate. My follow-up question to that though is how can students effectively communicate their concerns to school boards, administrators, and policymakers? So I want to lean in a little bit and be a little bit more specific with that question. You just gave us the what to, right? Like you can send an email, you can call, book an appointment. But when I say how in this particular question, I guess my question is if I am not accustomed to using my voice, how should I go about even drafting that email or approaching the conversation, right? What if I'm not sure if what I'm recommending is a good idea, right? Like, so how do I do that?
Right. So usually I bring my concerns to my friends who are in a student council or in the National Honor Society or the Beta Club, some service based club, and I bring the idea to them and I can kind of gauge the crowd. So if I had a concern about a certain class that I was like, hey, I don't think this class is using the potential that it should, and I brought it up to my friends, and they were like, oh, I actually heard that we're changing something about this, then there's no need to go confront if you already know the answer to your question. But if there's a genuine concern that you recognize between multiple different kinds of people in your student body, I think it would be important to have a team when you go and not necessarily confront your administrators, but come to them respectfully with a large amount of students that are concerned about the same topic you are. And remember to always be respectful when you're talking to adults, because coming in guns ablaze isn't going to get you as far as you think it might. Most adults would appreciate respect, and for you to come at them as an adult, talking like an adult, using proper communication and scheduling via email, and then coming to talk to them in person, because face to face communication is really effective.
Yet another very smart strategy, right? So before you even have that conversation with that particular administrator, just to kind of do a litmus test, for lack of better words, with your peers to find out and am I the only one that feels this way, or are other people having the same experience? So what I hear you saying is that it's really important to approach administrators with some data, some stories to kind of validate what it is that you're sharing with them, and to kind of lean into a pain point that you're experiencing as a student to kind of get their buy-in. Did I understand you correctly?
Yes, of course.
Awesome, awesome. So, how might recent policy changes impact student voices in decision making?
So, here in Mississippi, where I live, We are currently working on expanding the student board member position locally, which is a positive change. We actually have a group of students on our state superintendent advisory council coming up with a presentation to show the entire Department of Education coming up next week about local student board members, which is very exciting and very good progress just to really get the word out. But when you're feeling negative change, it's important to remember to still stay confident because progress isn't always linear.
Hmm.
So there might be some ups and downs in your journey to advocacy, but just remember that if it's something that you're passionate about, eventually the sun will shine through and there will be something positive.
I love it. I love that. Always look for the bright side. Also great advice, just period, right? Not just with self-advocacy, but with all things. Look for the light instead of the darkness. Thank you for that. Um, my my follow-up question though would be like what specific partnerships should students seek as it relates to advocating for themselves? So should they reach out to their local PTA? Should they reach out to perhaps some local businessmen or women, advocacy groups like in Autism Speak? Like, is there um, any one group that you would recommend or all of the above?
I guess it really just depends on what you're looking to advocate for.
Mhm.
So, if, for example, you wanted to advocate for more student board member positions, then I would recommend getting in contact with NSBMA, who is very helpful. They are currently helping me on my journey at my high school. But also, it just depends on what you are looking for as a student. So, if you are looking for more AP classes, I would talk to your district testing coordinator. Or if you are concerned about your lunch at school, I would talk to the food services at your high school. Or we have a group called Commodores Care because we're the Lafayette Commodores that are focused on helping needs based families in our community. So, working directly with them if you have a concern or just other outreach programs. It just is specific to what you are looking to do in your district.
So, what's the role of educators in student advocacy? Because we've been talking about so far in our conversation, we've talked about the administrators, but we haven't really talked about the role of educators. And I have a sneaking suspicion, right, going back to your introduction, that teachers like Miss Allen, like, really do play a tremendous role in student advocacy, if for no other reason, helping children to find their voice, being able to identify and articulate what their concerns are. But that's my thought, right? And it's been a while since I've been in high school. From your perspective in today's world, what is the role of the educator in student advocacy?
I've been very blessed, and all of my teachers have been so supportive in everything that I've wanted to achieve throughout middle and high school. So it may not only be that your teacher can help you find your voice or really like own up to what you're wanting to do, but sometimes teachers know the logistics of things better than you do. So if you don't aren't sure who to contact, feel free to ask your student council sponsor or teacher that you trust or know, or if you're not sure if your email sounds great, or if you're working on a piece of policy or some other outreach thing, even just asking for help with grammar is a big way to really get your point across. My teachers have been so supportive throughout my journey, and I would 110% recommend talking to your teacher if you can.
So would I. Educators are a good first step for most things as it relates to school. Now, Kate, I just want to call out once again, you have a beautiful resume, a fantastic resume. It's clear to me that you have been advocating for yourself and for others for a long time. But if I am a student who, I may not have the same type of resume, I may not feel comfortable utilizing my voice. Um, and I oftentimes feel dismissed or ignored when I come to an educator and administrator in reference to some ideas that I may have for change. What is your recommendation for me? Like, how do I go about pushing past the feeling dismissed and ignored to make sure that my point of view is heard?
Well, that student you're describing is one of the main reasons I wanted to become a student board member. Living in a rural district, there's a lot of different kinds of people that come from different socioeconomic backgrounds at my high school. So being able to advocate for every person throughout the state of Mississippi and also at my high school was very important. So having that student board member position is a great way for districts to be able to get in contact with all different kinds of students at your school. So I would recommend that position first of all. But also talking to a teacher that you know and trust about your issues is a big first step. Or even talking to friends that you might know, I always recommend that. And even talking to your student council, that would be a great first step as well. And even if it's not face to face, an email or a friendly letter is always another great first step.
To the best of your knowledge, Kate, are there opportunities for students to share their voice anonymously? And if so, what might that look like?
That would probably be on a district by district basis if I had to guess. So some sort of maybe a Google form or like a Dropbox in the office or something like that. That would be one way. I would suggest we don't currently have anything similar to that at my high school, so I'm not 100% sure, but probably something similar to like a suggestion box at the cafeteria or something.
So could I leverage my parents? So let's say I don't necessarily feel comfortable talking with anyone in the school directly. In that instance, would it be okay for me to talk to my mom or my dad to say, hey, this is how I feel. I don't feel comfortable saying that myself and asking my parents to advocate on my behalf?
Of course, yes. So parent and student input is very important when it comes to a school board because school boards hear a lot from different teachers and educators. So having that student or that parent input is going to directly impact them. And it's very important. So being able to talk to a trusted loved one is just as important as being able to talk to a peer or a teacher.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And so again, as it relates to self-advocacy, would attending my local school board meeting, would that be my first step, or should my first step be an email or perhaps a combination of both?
I guess it would just depend on what your issue might be. If it's something that is not currently on the school board agenda, then I wouldn't suggest necessarily going to a school board meeting and kind of confronting someone up in their face personal. Maybe an email, and if you get no response, maybe getting directly in contact with that person. But then again, it just depends on your pressing issue.
So from my experience, there are normally school board members that are passionate about specific things. So would it make sense in my strategy to identify, for me, it would be school mental health, right? And so if I had a concern or I want to say an initiative that I wanted to advance, I would intentionally seek out the school board member who was passionate about that thing. So is that what you're recommending, that you go to the school board member that sees that particular um, concern the same way you do and might be more open to that initiative than another school board member? Or would you recommend contacting um, any school board member that you can get in contact with?
Yeah, so definitely in local districts, if there's someone that you know is passionate about the same topic as you, it's a very easy shared common trait. So I kind of have that same thing whenever I go to my state school board meetings and I talk about my rural district. I get a lot of connections from the other school board members that come from smaller districts as well. So being able to find that connection with a school board member is going to help you eventually reach your goal as well.
Yeah. Okay. So what are some promising trends in student advocacy that we should be paying attention to right now?
So, definitely the increase in student board member roles across the country, as well as student advocacy groups, whether that be an advisory committee for a school board or a superintendent or a principal. There are a lot of different routes that that advisory group could take. So, I'm seeing an uptick in a lot of those. I also recently attended a school board conference in Atlanta, and it was so promising to see all these different presentations about student board members and their increase across the country is so uplifting and powerful. I'm so excited to hear about it. And NSBMA is still a small organization, I would say right now, but we are continually adding more student board members. So continuing to watch for that student board member increase is very powerful, and I would definitely keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so as it relates to student school board members, that is normally something that is set aside for high school students, correct?
Yes. So we've had this question a few times at different conferences or things like that. So it really just depends on your high school, how you wanted to take that route. So we know a lot of districts that have multiple high schools and then one school board. So we have some that have a student board member from each high school or that are voted on by the student body, or there's just one student board member that is voted on by all the high schools. We even have seen some sixth through eighth grade student board members with districts without a high school. So it really is specific and independent to what your district and your board looks like. But typically, we see a junior or a senior in high school serving on the board, or a senior serving on the board with a junior kind of apprenticing or watching that position with the expectation to take on that role as a senior.
What are your thoughts about middle school students participating in the school board on some level?
I think it's great. We kind of see a lot of negative talk and when it comes to middle school. But as obviously a former middle schooler, I was serving on a leadership council in the seventh and eighth grade. And while it was a little bit difficult to manage with the support of my family and my teachers, I was able to make that happen. And I was never looked down upon because I was a middle schooler. It was almost impressive because of how young I was advocating for myself and for my peers. So I say if you have the heart for it, then there shouldn't be anything keeping you away from doing what you love.
Yeah, I'm being completely biased. When I look at the data, we see the sharpest rise and increase in middle school, not only in incidences of anxiety and depression and acting out behaviors. But we also see like an increase in suspensions and all of that good stuff. And so I really feel like there's something happening at middle school, and we kind of all know what it is because we've lived through it, right? Middle school can be very, very wicked. Um, I think because of that dynamic, I would really, really love to see a middle school student in addition to a high school. I'm definitely not saying let's not have high school, but I'm saying let's do both. And I would also like to hear from a middle school voice because I think that they are just at that what we call tween stage, right? Too little to be big, too big to be little. And because of that, they're having a very specific experience that can really, really help inform some policies and decision making. And they have the largest need based upon the data. And so if anyone out there is watching, especially from my local school district, school board, which is Prince George's County, let's consider adding a middle school voice to our local school board. For one, would definitely love to hear what our middle school students have to
Yes,
say.
me as well. Middle school are very formative years. So if you give them the tools, they will be able to handle it fairly well. And if you trust in them and believe in them, they will live up to your expectations.
I think that's the key, right? Empowering and encouraging and affirming them to use their voice. It has been my experience that oftentimes when you do not hear from students, it's not because they don't care, don't have a thought, but they normally don't speak up because, as you were alluding to earlier, they just feel like their voice won't be heard. So they stay silent. But it is not because they are absent thoughts, that they are absent ideas. I don't think that that's an accurate representation of where our young people are. I think that there are many children like you, Kate, who definitely have something to say, definitely have ideas, would love to inform policy, but they just don't feel seen and heard. So how can school board members, how can educators, how can caregivers, how can parents, how can policymakers be intentional about including student voices in decision making for real? And when I say for real, I'm going right back to what you said at the beginning of our conversation. And that is actually listening to their feedback, um, and being willing to stretch ourselves. So if they give us some ideas that kind of challenge our thoughts, that we don't automatically assume that our young people are wrong, but that we will actually take some time to kind of look at ourselves to see, are we being rigid? Are we stuck? Are we preventing change from happening? What can we do as the adults in your life, Kate, to better show up and support you and other children and youth like you, as it relates to sharing your thoughts, your ideas, your opinions? How can we support you better?
Aside from obviously creating those student board member positions or those advisory groups, the best thing that adults can do is just listen to their students. I
Mm-hmm.
was talking to my state board chair the other day at a panel, and he used the example of a car salesperson. So, whenever you're at the dealership and someone's trying to sell you a car, they usually cater to your needs. Oh, you want the car washed? Well, we can get it washed for you. We can change the oil. We'll get your tires rotated, whatever you might need. And we need to come at that approach the same way that a school board member would. So, being able to cater to your audience is something that we should all do, with that audience being the students. So, as a school board member, listening to the customer, which are the students, is so imperative as your role, because everything you do is for them. So, whether they have leadership positions already in place, listening to what they are saying. And if you don't have any student advocacy groups, I would totally recommend creating something at your school level, whether it even is just an advisory council or a student council, just something to have a student body full of students that are engaged and have something to say, just making sure that you listen to them, because they have important things to say. They just need some ears for their words to fall upon.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. And so, Kate, as we bring our conversation to a close, is there any advice that you would want to give to like a younger person, right, who perhaps may not yet be in high school, but does have some thoughts and some opinions, does have some concerns about their experiences in school? What advice would you give them?
Your biggest tool that you have is being a student. And you may not think that, but it really is. So, coming from a teen to a preteen position brings you to an advantage. So, if you show up at the board meeting and they see a child in the audience, the school board members will ultimately be engaged and wondering what you have to say. So, just being a student, while it may seem as a disadvantage, is actually a huge advantage for you, because you have that effect for everyone to kind of turn their ears to you and see what you were talking about. All educators and adults and school board members and principals and administration, everybody loves hearing what a student has to say if they have the guts to get up and say it. So I think it's important to help you find your voice and to really use it to an advantage while you can.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. I have shared with many people that your voice has power. If you are a student, your voice absolutely has power. Parents, your voice has power. So, Kate, you may not know this, but formerly I was the senior director of school mental health for District of Columbia Public Schools. And while that sounds like a nice title to have, at the end of the day, what was most effective was the voices of our students and our parents. So I echo what it is that Kate is sharing. Students and parents have the loudest voices, and they should have the loudest voices. Students, especially, again, going back to the used car salesman example that Kate used, our students are our customers, and everything we do is specifically for them. And so, like, we would not run a business without making sure that we are providing for our customer exactly what our customer needs and wants. It's the same idea or a comparable idea with schools. Our students are our focus and the reason why we show up. We have to listen to them to make sure that what we're doing on a day-to-day basis is actually meeting their needs. So we definitely need to listen to them. Kate, would you offer any advice to any parents or caregivers?
Um, I would say it's very important to also, again, listen to your child. If they come to you with a concern, they are coming to you from a point of safety and wanting to reassure and really have that parental role. And caring for your child. So if they have something to say and they're too afraid to say it, then it's up to you to bring that to the board and really present yourself as a representation of your child.
Very good. Well, Kate, I have to tell you, you have been a tremendous honor, a wealth of information. I appreciate you for your example, for, letting other students know that the adults don't make up the policies by themselves. There are students who sit on these boards across the nation to affect change at the policy level. And so, if that is something that you want to do, you can do it. Kate, how would they get involved with NSBMA? So, let's say I don't necessarily want to become a student board member, but I do kind of want to support, I do want to learn more. How can a person go about, especially a student, go about learning more about the NSBMA and to support you, perhaps from a distance? Let's say I don't want the leadership, right? I don't want the liability of it, but I do like what it is that you're doing and I want to support you. How do they support you?
Yeah. So we have an Instagram. I believe our Instagram is nsbma.us. So following us on there, sharing our posts, staying connected. We usually post a lot of engaging content. So it's a really good place. We have a website. Our website is nsbma.net. So that's another way to get connected. So staying connected on social media, especially nowadays, is a very easy and effective way. So definitely on our website or on Instagram. We have a conference called Start Plus, which is another way to get connected. If you are a student board member and you want to find other people just like you, that's another great way to get connected.
Okay, well, again, Kate, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to sit with me to share with the Miss Dr. Kenya audience how you can get involved at the student level. I hope that today's conversation was helpful for you, that you took away some nuggets. And with that, Kate and I wish you a tremendous rest of the day. And I look forward to seeing you next month. Bye.
Yes. Thank you so much.